It's time for something, well, not so brief and a little different. In this video, I'm going to review the Nth Review. 5 years ago, I set out to create a series of high-quality video game reviews, and I believe to some extent I did just that. This is a celebration of that extremely difficult work, and I look forward to what might be next. By the summer of 2014, I was really getting irritated with the professional gaming press and how they reviewed games. I can't blame high-level outlets like GameSpot, IGN, or Polygon too much. It's the nature of the beast. Analytics show time and time again that many people seeking an opinion on a video game want it within 48 hours of its release. Gamers want a score and a synopsis so they know whether to throw their hard-earned dollars at the latest and greatest. This means outlets often have reviewers blast through a game's length over a weekend, then squeeze out a barely insightful and possibly incoherent review that merely scratches the surface. Even worse are provisional reviews that may not reflect the reality of a game at all, but they go up anyway so the site can surf the new release SEO wave. I liked analyzing games and rendering in-depth verdicts, but the game review space was pretty full, and as a one-person operation, well, new games are pretty expensive. Even with media credentials at flesh-eating Zipper, getting a game in advance of its release date was an extremely difficult task, so our reviews often came after that critical release window. But I thought I found a way in, something that no one was really doing. To that point, I'd been doing video work and experimenting with documentary projects and game-related features. In 2011, I cut together a 5-minute video about my favorite real-time strategy game, Rise of Nations. I dove into its mechanics to explain why the game worked for me on so many levels. That same year, I produced a longer, far more theatrical feature for id shooter Rage, which is still one of my favorite reviews. It really gave me a taste for where I could take my skills. So back in 2014, I really needed a project to focus those analytical video producing skills on. We had seen Ubisoft's Watch Dogs at E3 a few years prior, and I'd stood by as it was bowled over with indifference by critics and gamers alike when it released. I put out feelers on producing longer documentary-style video reviews, something I hadn't seen in a sea of quick looks and Twitch streams. Tying in a variety of trailers, materials, and original footage with a 7,000-word script, my Nth Review for Watch Dogs dropped in October 2014, a full 5 months after the game released, clocking in at just over 40 minutes long. Now I have to admit, that might seem like a really dumb idea. 5 months was a bit too long to make a statement about Watch Dogs, even if it was well produced. With nothing else on my platter besides my job and marathon training runs, I figured 2 months to produce a review was pretty reasonable, but those timetables kept stretching. Sure, I also got complaints that a 40-minute video was too long to watch, but most of the content I was watching was longer than that and getting a lot of views, so I was going to do whatever I wanted to lengthwise. But there was a huge difference between what I was doing and what those guys were doing. They had an audience. Success on YouTube is relative, but my Watch Dogs review hovered at around 200 views for well over a year. I was disappointed, but I knew the road to success was to continually push new reviews and build an inventory of awesome content. Eventually, I fell into a rhythm, and over the next year and a half, I produced 6 Nth Reviews, creating nearly 4 hours of high-quality video content. I don't even need to toot my own horn there. The positive feedback was consistent, and I'm very proud of that, even if there's probably a bit of selection bias among those who actually watch the content. I gained a small but passionate following, the subscribers slowly ticked upward, but my most popular episode, the Destiny review, still barely eclipsed 1,000 views, which is a blip in the grand scheme of things. Now here's where things get complicated as an artist. Was I in this to make art, or for the potential to make money? For starters, that's a circuitous virtue signal of a question. I was making Nth Reviews so I could make more Nth Reviews. In our capitalist society, games to review cost money. Food to sustain me to review those games costs money. Housing, water, electricity, hardware, software, internet access time, and much more costs money. In this dark age before basic income, Nth Reviews took months to produce because, like everyone else, I spent most of my productive hours laboring to reliably acquire money. Look, the vast majority of artists work in obscurity. Only a lucky few get to make a living producing their passions, making it an exciting hobby for pretty much everyone else. The issue is simple supply and demand. There are hundreds of thousands of YouTube and Twitch channels run by people trying to make money playing and talking about games, hoping to make it big. But there's only so much of that money to go around. Spread equally, no one would be able to make a living doing this. Instead, that money pools into the PewDiePies, Captain Sparkles, and Dr. Disrespects of the world, while everyone else fights for the scraps. Most get nothing at all. Supply is high and demand isn't high enough. 1,000 people can support one YouTuber, but one person can't support 1,000 YouTubers. Even though I wanted to make more nth reviews, they became extremely difficult to justify when the channel only had 100 subscribers and a total view count in the low 4 digits after a couple years of operation. A game took between 20 and 50 hours to complete while I jotted down notes and cataloged footage, which was between 20 and 50 hours of video. I took those notes and produced a 5,000 to 7,000 word script which had to be recorded and edited. I'd usually have to play a number of other reference games, then note and catalog that footage as well. Graphics, including animations and title cards, also had to be created before everything was assembled in Premiere. In total, the process of producing each nth review took about an hour and a half for every minute of content. I can reveal exclusively that the nth review, after 5 years of operation, has made an entire $4.91 in ad revenue. That means for just those first 6 reviews alone, I worked for roughly a penny an hour. Of course, that doesn't factor in any expenses. For a while, I set up and promoted a Patreon after concluding that I really didn't need that much money to get by on a monthly basis and quit my low-paying job, which would let me produce more content, which would bring in more ad revenue, on and on. Games media professionals like Danny O'Dwyer and Drew Scanlon can transition from big outlets to independent documentary production on reputation alone and rake in over $20,000 a month on a platform like Patreon right out of the gate. I could not. There's also the simple fact that I'm not a good marketer. Places like Reddit, where a popular link grants thousands upon thousands of views, strongly discourages self-promotion. Places that tolerate self-promotion are packed to the brim with content that doesn't get views. At a point, the only thing I could hope for was a retweet or a mention by someone influential in the industry, or to have a popular post on r/games, which obviously never happened. Ultimately, I had to change tactics. In the summer of 2016, I started putting together nth brieflies, which were bite-sized videos I could produce and release on a weekly basis. These were strictly 800-word scripts that allowed me to explore and get academic about older games, or games I hadn't finished yet, or didn't want to finish. Some brieflies did relatively well for an obvious reason. People could finish them. My subscriber count doubled and I put together my 7th and longest nth review for Deus Ex: Mankind Divided that September. That review, as much as I loved it, still failed to attract views, so I put full-length reviews on the back burner and worked on brieflies through to the summer of 2017. Eventually, even those views diminished and I was back to square one, producing content no one was watching in a sea of content no one could watch. I figured an 8th nth review for Arcane's Prey was my Hail Mary, the final thing I was going to put my all into, and hope would catch the attention I needed to make the nth review a real life changer, despite the fact that none of my other work had done that already. Desperation is a tricky bitch, I tell ya. The review I designed would have required not just a playthrough of Prey, but playthroughs of its inspirations, BioShock and System Shock 2, to really ground my thoughts on the game. At the same time, I just got married, landed a new job, needed to move, and went back to school to acquire that elusive college degree. Very quickly, the 150 or so hours I needed to make the Prey review seemed like a pretty irresponsible request. I also knew in my heart of hearts that if it was only going to get another 300 reviews after all that work, it would have broken my heart. The nth review just wasn't feasible anymore. So it's been 2 years and I've been thinking a lot about the nth review again, but it simply can't exist in its old review formats, unless traffic suddenly spiked or whatever. If more content is going to land here, it's going to be more game design theory and ponderance on why society isn't making more inclusive games, and what those games would look like, which is something I wanted to move toward years ago anyway. I've spent the past 3 years building Star Pre, a futuristic racing game for Android devices with longtime pal Aaron Hibbard from Hibby Games. It's now available in early access on the Google Play Store, so check the link below. So no, I don't get to make a living sitting in a dark room, playing games and producing YouTube videos like I once dreamt of. And that's okay.